What are the three methods of calculating GDP? One is your expenditure method. So there are consumers in the economy, there are firms in the economy, government in the economy, there are some foreigners who are spending the goods and services which are produced in your economy. And the expenditure which is made by all of them is added together. And that expenditure, that sum total of all of these expenditure is GDP. Another is income method. What you do is that you calculate the income of the firms, you calculate the income of the workers, you calculate the income of all the other organizations in the economy, and you add them together to get the total GDP in the economy. And the other is a production method. So you add up the production of all newly produced goods and services in the economy. Note that you do not have to take up the intermediate consumption in this case. I'll just talk about each of them in little detail now. One is your expenditure method. What do you do in expenditure? I've told you that there are consumers, firms, government, and there are foreigners who are spending on the goods and services which are produced in your economy. You add the expenditure which is made by all of them, and you club them together and you get your GDP. So, but you have to keep in mind one thing, that you can only add up expenditure on final goods and services. Fine. What are final goods and services? Which are not resold, one, and two, which are used as inputs. And two, which are not used as inputs for producing other goods and services. Fine. So those are final goods and services. So for example, you pick up, say, bread. Okay. Now in the production of bread, when you are making an expenditure on bread, okay, then that expenditure should be counted. But the expenditure which would have gone in buying the input for production of bread, it should not be counted. Fine, because that price of input which have gone into the production of bread, that would have been reflected in the price of bread. Okay, what happens in income method? You take up the income from labor. Okay, that is you calculate what is the income from labor, which is wages, salaries. There's some benefits which are paid to the workers. Then you calculate the capital income. Capital income is in the form of profits. It's in the form of rental income. It's in the form of interest income. Then government is making some amount of income in the form of taxes, sales taxes. Then net factor income from abroad. You are adding income of the nationals of your economy working outside, working abroad. So if we are considering US as the domestic economy, then US residents who are working abroad, working other than US, their income will be added into in this method in calculating GDP. But the income of the foreigners who are working in US will not be added in GDP. Then depreciation. What is depreciation? You purchase machine in some year. You are using that machine over a period of time. It is subjected to some amount of wear and tear. Now, when firms are calculating their profits, they are subtracting this depreciation. So you need to add this amount back into the sum of other incomes in order to correspond to what GDP is trying to measure. What happens in production method? In production method, you are calculating the value added by each industry. Okay, so for example, you calculate the value of output for bread production, the price at which bread is selling and the amount of the quantity produced of bread. But from that you subtract the amount of inputs, the value of the inputs which are going into the bread production. There must be some flour which is used, some laborer who must be producing this bread. All of those incomes, all of those value of those goods and services will not be added. So you have to avoid the double counting. So in order to compute GDP, okay, say for bread production, what you do is you need to calculate the value added by each manufacturer. So value added is the value of the firm's production less the value of intermediate goods used in production. Fine. So in this case, what? Bread's value added is price of bread minus bread's value added is price of bread into quantity of bread minus per unit cost of inputs for bread into the amount of inputs used for bread. Note that it is important to realize that the payments to labor and capital, that is salaries and rental cost of machines, they're not subtracted from revenue. Labor and capital, they are what contributing to value added. Only intermediate inputs are subtracted from revenue.